260 Hispanic chambers of commerce around the country and in Puerto Rico, and more than 100 corporations who have deep roots and intention in improving equity and diversity and opportunity in our minority business community. It's my honor today to welcome you again to this important webinar presented by a corporate partner, PMI, and our board of directors led by Chairwoman Alice Rodriguez at the United States Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. I want to thank our staff and in advance all of our great speakers that will be presenting great content that will be helpful to you. Special thanks to Felipe Armanal and of course Aaron Sherinian for their partnership with the United States Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. These are authentic relationships we're developing, and we know that today's content will be very helpful to you. So with that, without further ado, now it is my honor to hand it to a great colleague of mine. She's our Vice President for Programs and Communications, the wonderful Brianna Dimas, who will introduce our three expert panelists for today's webinar. Thank you all so much, and thank you also to Monica Garza for her hard work. Brianna.
Thank you, Ramiro. Welcome, everyone. You are in for a real treat today. Thank you for joining us for an insightful conversation about trust, the root of business storytelling, presented by Philip Morris International, PMI. You'll hear from a panel of experts today on how to engage your audience through your branding and mastering your own authentic story. You will also have the opportunity at the end to ask questions live, so bring your questions and be ready. I am honored to serve as your moderator today and to introduce our three panelists. Today we have with us Dr. David W. Miller, Senior Professional Specialist in Ethics and Director of the Faith and Work Initiative at Princeton University. Dr. Miller brings an unusual bilingual perspective to the classroom and to the boardroom. Before receiving his PhD in ethics and joining the faculty at Princeton University, he spent 16 years in senior executive positions in international business and finance, including 8 years in London. As the director of the Princeton University Faith and Work Initiative, housed in the Keller Center for Innovation, Dr. Miller also conducts high-level research, teaches and develops programs, and serves as an advisor to corporate CEOs and senior executives on ethics, values-based leadership, culture, and the role of faith at work. An article in the Wall Street Journal recently featured his work, and one client referred to him as the on-call ethicist. Welcome, Dr. Miller.
Thank you. It's an honor to be with you all.
We also have with us Ms. Soundari Mukherjea, the founding partner of T-Soul, a leadership consultancy firm focused on business storytelling, future-ready skills, behavior, attitude, and mindset transformations. Having worked for over 20 years in the area of finance, operations, banking, and entrepreneurship, Soundari has an insider's view on the challenges that organizations and teams face, and this drives her passion while working on various consulting and capacity-building projects. Welcome, Soundari.
Thank you so much for the kind introduction, and it's a privilege to be part of this panel.
Last but definitely not least, we have with us Mr. Aaron Sherinian, a public relations and communications professional with more than 2 decades of service in the corporate, philanthropic, and diplomatic sectors. His career has included experience spanning the globe and building bridges between political ideologies, geographies, and industries. He believes in the power of cutting-edge communication to drive positive global change. Aaron is the Vice President of Global Communications at PMI. This unique role places him at the intersection of communications transformation for one of the largest corporations in the world. Welcome, Aaron.
Thank you. It's great to be here learning together with you.
And with that, we will jump right into our panel discussion. Now more than ever, our world is surrounded by uncertainty, and it is that much more essential for business leaders to build a foundation of trust with their customers, their clients, and their stakeholders. So how do we do this? How do you build and tell your authentic story? How does that affect your marketing and your organic messaging every day? That's what we hope to explore today. So David, we'd love to start with you. Much of your research and expertise has been rooted in trust and the restoration of trust. Please tell us a little bit about your recent findings.
Well, thank you again. I'm honored, Brianna, to be part of this august panel and all the terrific people listening in. And if I can allow a personal note to start, I feel like I should become an honorary member of the chamber because I'm currently in South Florida, in Miami. And as all of you will certainly know, in fact, many of you might be within a stone's throw of where I am right now, that Miami would not be the Miami today if it were not for the vibrance of the Latino Hispanic community. economically, socially, culturally, any vector you look at, religiously, it is the heartbeat of South Florida. So I applaud everyone here and the contributions you're making, as particularly those who are small and medium-sized business enterprises that are moving the needle. It's profound. The Florida of today is not the Florida of even 30 or 40 years ago. So I applaud that, and I feel like I'm in your back seat encouraging it. So to the question of trust and distrust, and anyone of you on the call who are a small business owner, or if you're with a big corporation, you know everything rises and falls on trust. It rises and falls on trust. If someone distrusts you, game over. Then you start changing how you behave towards them. They change how you behave each to each other. So I was in a conversation with Aaron and his colleagues at PMI a couple of years ago, including the person who's now the CEO, and they were making the comment that no one trusts us. And I said, well, yeah, there's kind of a good reason. The industry sector you're in doesn't really have a good track record in that area. And the CEO said, but we're changing now. And he made a very compelling story of the transformation of the company, its product line, reduced risk product, thinking beyond nicotine. And I said, well, wow, that's a story I'd like to be a part of. And he said, well, but this trust thing, no one believes us. And I said, well, maybe you should look to different sources of wisdom. He said, what do you mean? And that led us down the path of this little booklet, which we've produced, sponsored by PMI. It's called Towards a Restoration of Trust, ? And the subtitle is Preliminary Insights and Lessons from Wisdom Traditions. So what we did is we said, if there's one thing religious traditions do very well at their best, it's they give a pathway back to healing, a pathway back to wholeness. So if you've injured your neighbor, if you've injured someone close to you in your family or harmed them in some literal or metaphorical way, or one community is angry at another, how do you restore trust? And the great thing that these communities do is they help people find a pathway back. So maybe if some of you happen to be Catholic or have Catholic roots, you'll think of the act of confession, the rite of confession. There's a procedure, a pathway back to wholeness. So this idea of restoring trust, maybe we shouldn't just look at spin doctors and lawyering up and so forth, like so often happens in the business world. Maybe we should look at sources of ancient wisdom. So what we did with the encouragement of PMI is we did a study, a colleague of mine, Michael Tate, and I, we did a study of some 30 different scholars, primarily focusing on the three so-called Abrahamic traditions, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, all around the world. Over half the people we interviewed were people of color and female, to say, in your regions, in your zones, in your tradition, what wisdom does there exist that might help us think about restoring trust? And to be sure, we also could have looked at indigenous traditions, Hinduism, Buddhism, but just as a matter of scope and scale, we focused on those three traditions, which cover well over half the world's population. What we came up with was 11 theses or 11 ideas, and they're not like 11 steps to perfection, but they were ideas and theses that come distinctly and uniquely out of different wisdom traditions. And that if we could find a way to transpose these ideas into corporate speak, if you will, or business speak or marketplace speak, well, wow, maybe it'd be a fresh way to think about restoring trust. And as we, within PMI and some other organizations, because it's a public document, PMI made it available to the universe, so to speak, the amount of traction and phone calls I get and my colleague, and I think Aaron, you're finding it as well, the people are first like, you're kidding, really? And once they realize it's not about religiosity and whose belief system is true or false or whatever, we kind of park that. That's someone's personal decision. But for sure, wisdom is in these traditions. You cannot deny the profound wisdom that, for in many cases, 4 or 5 millennia have been thought about by some of the greatest thinkers who ever walked the earth. That's what we've tapped into. And surprisingly, and maybe one brief other comment on to set the table, I was hosted at Davos, World Economic Forum, 2 years ago, when it was in person just before the pandemic, by PMI, and we presented a few events built around this and informal events at various sessions. And I was astounded at the number of business people, some very prominent, some we would never have known their name. All of said, you're onto something. We just don't know how to talk about it. We get a little bit afraid whenever we hear the word religion mentioned in a corporate space. So I think there's a there, whether you're a small business with 8 employees or 50 employees struggling to make payroll and just succeed, or whether you're a part of a large corporate or a global firm, these ideas, I think, have some resonances, and we might have time to talk about one or two of these theses or these ideas.
Thank you, David. This is a great transition, I think, to Soundari and the work that you do as a business coach. Can you tell us a little bit about storytelling and trust and how they're linked?
In fact, I loved, thank you so much, David, for sharing your paper. I loved one of the lines, and it's pretty much right at the starting. We cannot walk out the door without entering into a series of exchanges structured by and reliant on trust. And I think trust sort of establishes that connection, the conduit through which anything passes between any two people. And Zig Ziglar is like famously talked about, if people like you, they'll listen to you. But if they trust you, they'll do business with you. And it's all back to that core. And I was reading this book a few months back. It's a book called Messengers. Who do we listen to, who we don't, and why? And it talks about, when somebody communicates an idea, the audience just doesn't make just judgments about the coherence and the validity of the communicator's message, but they also make a lot of judgments about the messenger too. And storytelling is the greatest way to build that bridge for a person, for a brand, to establish that trust. When people hear stories, the brains light up in the same area as if you're experiencing it. And that's what makes stories memorable. And our natural tendency to embrace the stories, together with that sense of connectedness that they foster, makes it possible for two strangers, actually to build a relationship. And in those small moments, trust is built. And I think Brené Brown calls it the sliding door moments, while the lift door is just closing kind of moments. And I just want to share a couple of examples. I'm a big fan of Rafael Nadal. So I remember Aussie Open Tennis 2020. It was the second round match. Nadal was just wrapping it up. He was winning the third set. He was 4-1 up, 30-15. He was playing against Delbonis. And the serve from Delbonis, one of the rare times when Nadal's forehand goes errant, goes and hits the ball kid. The ball kid's name is Anita Bacal, and Nadal rushes over, says, "Are you okay?" Checks on her, gives her a quick peck on the cheek, and she's blushing. And for her, he says, it was not a good moment. And he was so scared that the ball was going straight at her. And he just gave her a headband as a memento. And she said she was being a really brave girl. That was a moment. And it was a moment of creating an opinion about a sense of trust about the person. It was not a competency-based thing. That's his game. But it was an integrity-based thing. And he didn't leave it at that. He went over next day and caught up with her parents and had breakfast with them. And he signed a cap of saying, "To my friend Anita, all the very best." And in that moment, again, we form an opinion about Nadal as a person. And that's the kind of moments that we're talking about building trust. And for a company, building trust is something which is absolutely at the center of what the brand is. And this is one of my favorite anecdotes. So this is a company called ID Fresh Foods. The CEO is a person called Mustafa. ID Fresh Foods makes idli and dosa batter. And what is idli and dosa? I think it became popular during VP Kamala Harris's campaign around the US. It's a South Indian fermented pancake batter, which is steamed, or you use it in a frying pan. It's a breakfast dish, just pretty much like a pancake. So in 2016, Mustafa created a campaign called ID Trust Shops. And what are these trust shops? They're just refrigerated chillers, which he kept inside apartments and office complexes. And people could just go and pick up any ID product and pay for it by just dropping cash in a box next to the chiller. No CCTV cameras, no security guards to monitor, nothing. And when he floated the idea, he was mocked. His whole team said, "You're crazy. It's India. Everybody's going to just steal it and go. Nobody's going to put money." And to everybody's surprise, actually, the scheme went off very well. And it was on Mustafa's belief that if you want your client or customers to trust you, you need to trust them first. And he talks about one particular trust shop in Chennai, which is where I'm from. It's in the south of India, and which is also where VP Kamala Harris is from, just for reference. There was a customer who kept taking the fresh food packet out, and he would keep paying by paying monopoly money in the box. So they were almost tested. He said, we need to withdraw the chiller from that complex. This is ridiculous. We're getting monopoly money. That's not the way business runs. But he said, let me give it a try. Let's keep it on for some more time. And one fine day, they dropped off a 500 rupee note, a legitimate note, and that made his day. And he says, these are the kind of thoughts which actually keeps me awake at night. The fear about what is the kind of world that we are leaving for our children. And what is the purpose of human intelligence if we can't create a world that has humanity, compassion, love, and trust? And again, the storytelling aspect is really relevant as well, because you can, again, as a leader, you can go up, stand up. Everybody has to listen to you. You can say, we need to trust our clients. It's important to understand the value of trust. That's very sermon based, right? Eyes would just glaze over, yeah, whatever. And like, that's how my team would say. But instead, he created this vision of what the brand stands for. And I think that's how really the storytelling element, putting yourself out there, showing up, shows up for the brand and for trust.
Thank you for those examples, Soundari. Those are really great. Well, Erin, I know you live this every day in your very unique role at PMI. Tell us a little bit about your strategy and your lens and how trust plays a role in your daily role.
Thank you. And thank you to Soundari and David and everyone who's brought this together. I learn every time I talk about this issue, and already we're just a couple of minutes into the webinar, and I've already learned something new from a paper I'm very familiar with, because again, our goal was to let experts go and do something that they're expert in. And that's where Dr. Miller and his colleague Michael and others, we really wanted to learn. And I have found in my job, which is maybe the last job that I ever expected to have, working for the last company I ever thought that I would be part of, has taught me that in the unexpected and letting people do what they do well, you're going to build trust. When you let people who are experts share with you something that they have brought to the table after years of research and finding and a lot of effort, that's where you really do build trust. My job at Philip Morris International is to engage with people, and to engage both inside the company and outside the company as the company transforms in this huge way. It's like turning around a massive ship, if you will, a company that's been known for producing and very successfully marketing and selling one product that's now looking to transform and to move itself as a company and its interaction with people into something different, into a smoke-free future, doing what the company and the company CEO has called unsmoking the future by bringing to people's attention what can be other alternatives. So when you do that, that sounds like a counterintuitive thing. Philip Morris International, perhaps talking about a smoke-free future might be counterintuitive to people. And so going to a counterintuitive place to find lessons is maybe what you should be doing. And I'll never forget when our now CEO, one of the first times I ever met him, I asked him very concretely, what would you have us do? Every executive, every time you're on a new job, you probably have done the same thing. You want to know right from the boss, what do you want me to do? What are the deliverables? And he's a person of business. He's made a successful career. And so I expected to hear some hard KPIs, some direct numbers, which I have heard, which we do have. But the first thing he said to me is, I want you to listen. And I want you to talk to people, our customers and our stakeholders, about where and how they see themselves as part of the transformation. So I will tell a story. I'm trying to learn from Soundari. And I'll tell you a story about why the faith traditions, the wisdom traditions, are maybe an unexpected place that we all should go to find trust, and how we can help make it part of our businesses and our organizations. A few days ago, I was the dinner guest at some dear friends' home. They have a lovely apartment. They are dear friends of my wife and of my family for many years, and both of them happen to be blind. That's how they describe themselves. Visually impaired is how other people describe themselves. They're a couple who happens to be unique in every way, and they're also unique in that they are blind. In coming into their home, their new home, which I had never visited because they just moved in, I found myself doing something. I took my friend by the hand and she was giving me a tour of their home. And I started guiding her around or moving her around. She stopped me and she said, "Aaron, this is my territory. You just got here." And again, I thought I was being helpful. I'm always learning, and she's always very open and authentic with me. But that phrase, "This is my territory, you just got here," is a reminder for me that organizations, large and small, corporations, big and small, those that the USHCC represent, we should be learning from organizations like faith traditions, wisdom traditions, who, like Dr. Miller said, like David mentioned, have had to look at how people can come back together, build a bridge so that they're moving towards a future. You can stay in the past, and it's important to look at the past and the lessons of what went on. But if you're building a future, you're going to have to come to some sort of common ground. And oftentimes it means allowing the people who have gone down that path to do so. In this case, it was my friend, but in the case of the wisdom traditions, we've learned some things. One of the things we've learned at Philip Morris International, and then I'll stop here so we can continue with the conversation. But one of the things that we've really learned is that it's about, and I think David's paper brings this out, a paper which, by the way, he wrote so that we could all learn from him and his colleague, Michael Tate. But it's a lot of it is about time. I hope Dr. Miller will talk about this, but if trust in all these various trust thermometers, barometers, indices that exist out there right now, if trust is something that every company wants, companies and organizations have to realize it's not something you can buy and have. It's a process that you're a part of. It's a place of vulnerability and courage and dialogue. It's a place more than something that you're just going to put on your shelf or put on your offering. And that time, that functionality of showing up with your message, saying what your company is going to do, and backing it up with science and evidence happens over time. So that for me has been a key learning. It's not always easy. People are skeptical, many of them with some reason, many of them because of a history, many of them because they don't have access to information. So you've got to show up with it and show up with it again and again.
Thank you, Aaron. That's a great transition back to your work, David. Are there any examples that you can share of how business leaders can learn from these faith and religious traditions and apply that to their own messaging and the stories they're telling, or strengthen their relationships?
Oh gosh, Aaron, I'm touched by what you just said, and maybe I'll just start with that one. As it happens, thesis number 11 is called. The official title is "The Long Tail of Responsibility." The long tail of responsibility, and by that we mean, as Aaron set it up, that just because a company or an individual or a founder of a business might have that aha moment, that life-changing moment to realize the way I have been doing business was wrong, I need to change something, or I haven't been straight with my customers, I've been following an industry practice which is a little dodgy or whatever, that it's not easy to change the paradigm. Systems reject change. Systems reject transformation. So this, what I call the vector of time, the arc of time, takes a real commitment, because sometimes when you change, you might lose your best customer right away because they liked it the old way, and yet you're trying to do it anew in a better way. So transformation takes time. Take a silly example. Say some of you might play golf or tennis. If your teacher, if you take a lesson, I say, "Oh, Miller, your grip's all wrong. You got to hold the racket this way or the club that way." I'll guarantee you'll play worse the next time you go play, because you're more comfortable with the incorrect way of doing it. But if you stick with it, the vector of time, people will start seeing the results. They will start seeing it in you. You don't have to tell them anymore. They already know it by virtue of your actions. So this I think that's a really important thing to think. It's not, "Oh, okay, I apologize, everything's fine," because the people on the other end who might have been harmed might still be mad as hornets and very upset about what goes on. And they'll appreciate the apology, but the wisdom traditions teach us you need to stay in that place of pain, and you have to almost absorb the pain of the person you may have injured or disappointed or let down, whatever the situation might be. And religions think in terms of eons, arguably infinity in some cases. So it's a fresh perspective. This is not about quarterly returns or meeting this month's numbers. Maybe another example is that. By the way, all these 11 theses were evident in various formulations in each of the 3 traditions, and I suspect in many others we didn't study. And thesis number 9 is honesty about an institution's ideals. Honesty about an institution's ideals is the most profitable strategy. And two major parts of restoring trust and trustworthiness is effectiveness, like you got to do what you say you're going to do. You have to be good at your job, and you have to be honest, transparent, reliable. So what is the one true goal? Now, many companies, large and small, have these beautiful marketing statements on the wall. Our mission is to do this or to do that to change the world. And really, it's frankly, a lot of times they're just, if you'll pardon the bad pun, Aaron, they're all just sort of puff and smoke and mirrors. But now and then they're real. And so is the real goal privately of the leadership team to maximize profits, to squeeze as much as I can out of the business? Is that really a real goal? You're just not honest enough to say it? Or do you really care about improving my neighborhood and caring about the health of our employees, their well-being, their care? So there's sort of a sense of, and if you look at the different wisdom traditions, they'll say language like, thou shalt not have any other gods before me. And they don't necessarily, although they could mean gods in a theistic sense, but it could mean the god of power, the god of money, the god of public reputation, the god of having your own way, the god of what everyone thinks of you. Those are often the altars we worship at. And the scriptures, these various traditions remind us, well, there's something bigger going on. There's a greater good. There's a common good. And are you really honest about that in your institution's ideals? Another one I'd mention is people talk about the word conversion. And I don't necessarily mean converting from one tradition to another, but let's say you adopt that. People talk about a humbling moment when your world is falling down. Like, let's say you can't meet payroll and you're bankrupt and you had a second mortgage on your home. Like, what do you do then? And it's a humbling moment. And maybe you didn't necessarily do something wrong, but that's where you are now. And these humbling moments are when the greatest conversions can happen. And I mean that more metaphorically, but it's an idea, a concept that comes from wisdom traditions. So when you recover from that, what are you now doing? How do you take advantage of that humbling moment? So long as it didn't kill you, how do you become a better person, a better leader as a result of that humbling moment? And conversion, if you think about it, it just means a turning around. And if you look in the ancient languages of Greek or Hebrew, it's a radical becoming of something else. It's not so much about a belief set, like that's a separate conversation. And by the way, I should say this document we put together, this white paper, it's not about religiosity. It's not about who's right. That's an interesting question, but that's not what we're talking about. It's about where is the wisdom? And if it's wisdom, then I want to hear it. And all these traditions talk about a turning around moment. Or do we revert to the mean? After we're through the crisis, do we go back to our old ways? Those are the moments when we can make those radical transformations, huge transformations. So in religious circles, we might call it a conversion. In a corporate world, we might call it a transformation, a radical realigning and turning around. Not just a little tweak, 10% this way, 10%, a radical rethinking of the whole business model. Very hard to do. Easier, frankly, I think, if you're a small or medium-sized business. You have more control, more decision-making authority. You probably don't have regulators breathing down your back like a big bank would or something, or government officials or health authorities. But I think that's one of the great reminders from the wisdom traditions, is the power of conversion and remembering what God, quote unquote, are we metaphorically worshiping at the feet of. There's others I could go to, but let me pause now in the interest of time.
No, that's great, David. You've given us a lot of good things to think about. Soundari, would you like to build on that and maybe share a little bit about messaging in general and things people should be considering when they're building that story, or maybe what not to do?
No, I just want to, build on also what Aaron mentioned about, barometers and vulnerabilities. The 2021 Edelman Trust Barometer talked about institutions, businesses garnering about 61% of trust from people. And okay, it was better than the government, which was at 53%, but 61%, it's not a great score, right? So trust is really when we are willing to enter into a relationship of vulnerability with somebody or an organization that actually has power over us. And I was listening to this interview by Shankar Vedantam, who is the host of this podcast called Hidden Brains, and very NPR podcast, very popular. So he was talking about, this I think happened sometime last year. He was traveling away from home when he started to experience a loss of vision in one eye. And he has a family history of retinal problems. And it turned out that he was suffering from a retinal detachment. Now, he was very far away from home. There were no doctors nearby. He eventually managed to find an eye doctor at around 9 p.m. in the night. It was a Tuesday night. And the doctor rightly said, okay, you have a retinal detachment and you need to go into surgery in the next few minutes or you're going to lose your eye. Now, at that point of time, there is no chance to get a second opinion. You don't have a chance to look up all the Google reviews to find out where the nearest doctor is, whether the doctor is good, bad, whatever. You don't have all that. So when you're drowning literally and somebody's throwing you a lifeline, you don't question the lifeline. You just grab onto it and you believe in it. And that's exactly what he did. He trusted the doctor. It turned out that he was a brilliant surgeon. He ended up saving his eye, but it reminded him that in a moment of great vulnerability, you don't respond with reason and logic. You respond with trust and faith. And when we go through these vulnerable times, we need to reach out to other people. And when other people are going through vulnerable times, we need to reach out to them as well. And I think it's all about making it purposeful, personal, building that transparency and showing up as a human. And I'm thinking about this. There is this fine dining restaurant in Seattle called Canlis. And in March 2020, till then, it was, one of those really posh, hip places. But come COVID, they just converted it in 15 days to a drive-through. In the morning, they were serving bagels, and the rest of the day, it was a burger stand. And they made this transition, keeping all their employees, and they were thinking at the time, maybe we need more hands as well, because drive-through, there's a lot of demand. And William Canlis, who's one of the founder brothers, he says, what I really love to do is feed people. And there's no ego in that. And if you just consider the essence of it, it's not about the butter knife or the design of that silver cold meat fork or anything like that. It's about caring for people with food. So when you set aside all that artificiality, all the fanciness, what is important is getting back to the basics of what you do. And this is, I think, so relevant for a lot of small business owners, right? What is the story that you can tell about what you do, which is plain and basic way of showing your appreciation and caring for your customers and for your work? And how do you do this? By being human. And I remember reading a LinkedIn post. There's this lady, Carly Bush, who was the VP of HR delivery at Global Medical Response, a company called Global Medical Response. She was doing a video interview with a candidate, and the candidate was getting distracted by her toddler crawling all over under a chair. And we've all been there. If the BBC person who was talking on Korea made news, this one did make the news. But Carly really encouraged her, and she could say that the candidate was getting agitated because you're on an interview, it's a job, matter of getting a job or not. So Carly just took a moment of pause and encouraged the mother to take care of her child first and even finish the interview. If you want, just keep the little one on your lap, continue with the interview if you think it's okay. And she could see the relief on the person's face. So it is not about, they talked about the family, the pets and all that, and they had the interview as well. And it was a great interview. So it's not really about, just doing what is supposed to be done, but it's about understanding where people are coming from, accommodating, and these small kindnesses make a world of a difference to the others. So really putting the other person there. And when you share examples and experiences like this, you're creating a pull. You're creating a pull saying, oh, that's a great company. I want to work there. You're also creating pull saying, this is the way we need to behave. So how do you take ownership of all these small changes? How do you make it personal? How do you make it purposeful? How do you build transparency in the process and show up as human? And that's what I think really leveraging the trust and the storytelling relationship is about.
Those are great examples, Soundari. Erin, do you want to build on that and maybe add a social media lens to how we think about social media and what our small business owners are sharing as well?
So Soundari said it perfectly when she talked about showing up as human. I think it's really interesting that means, and if we've learned anything during this pandemic period and this new normal that we live in, is that means recognizing and showing up as the whole human, right? And Soundari mentioned the examples of just where we're in each other's homes right now. Some of us have background filters on, some of us don't. You're going to hear my 6-year-old in a minute, I have a feeling, in the background. So we're showing up, and we've shown some more vulnerability as employees and as managers, et cetera. But we're learning something, that when it comes to a company, and the USHCC members, and your own mission statement says this, right? You're about sustainable prosperity, right? You're not about just helping society by showing up and being there. You want to make the best product available for your customer in the most sustainable, and that means a lot of things, not just sustainability in the CSR sense, but good business practice that makes money for all involved, for the benefit of the community. So I think we've got to show up for our customers and for our stakeholders and for our employees as the whole person, as their whole person. Our customers have needs and interests right now that are not just about what happens at the cash register. They care about society. They do care about the legacy of what a company was before they interact with it, but they also want to know where a company is going. They want to see that you've got a trajectory. And I guess if I could tie it back to these lessons from wisdom traditions, David and his colleague brought up something in their research that continues to really inspire me and move me as we think about stakeholder engagement. But they talk about how wisdom traditions teach us to, and he can say it better, I don't want to speak for your work, but the idea that if you treat your customers or your stakeholders or your publics as always about a transaction, they're going to stay that way with you. And that means transactions are easily gotten and easily gotten rid of. But if you have an approach that's about a long-term promise, a long-term relationship, a covenant with them that says, I'm going to be the company that you come to and trust because we're going to give you this service for the best value. And this is what we stand for, by the way, in society. We're going to do it in a way that gives you all better alternatives for whatever purpose. I think that says something really big. And before we move on to that, and I hope David can talk to us about that covenant versus transaction, but the question here, I think it was from Kareem. There was a good question about CSR. I'm not a CSR expert, but I've worked in it for many years, and it touches what we do. When it comes to storytelling, it's a lot like a birthday cake. We had a birthday in my house just this last week, and you can remove the frosting, and it's clear that it was just frosting. But if something's baked into the cake, it's really a part of it. CSR storytelling has to be integrated because it's part of what the business brings to the table. If CSR is just something that happens with a contribution once every now and then, or if it's something CSR storytelling will not ring true if it's about something that's totally detached from the business. It has to have something to do with what you're good at and what you're trying to transform to be. So I think that CSR storytelling is, again, part of that bigger covenant relationship, right, with your customer, with your stakeholder. It should be about something that's long-term. It's not just a mere date or a first date or a second date. It's probably a longer term relationship.
Very well said, Erin. Thank you. Well, I know we are about to jump into our live Q&A, the most exciting part, and we're seeing a lot of questions come through the chat and the Q&A. If you have not put your questions in, anyone from the audience, now is the time. Before we jump in, could I just ask each of you to maybe just share one piece of concise advice that you hope everyone leaves with today? David, no pressure. Let's start with you.
Well, this may deem me to be untrustworthy, but I'm going to cheat a tiny bit. I'm going to piggyback on what Erin asked me to talk about and then give my one piece of thought piece.
Sure.
So one of these theses is thesis number 3 that talks about I'm sorry, it's a different number. Number 6, that says lasting change, or you said sustainable change. Lasting change is guided by a move away from a contractual mindset towards a covenantal mindset. So if you look at these great wisdom traditions, usually they're not it's about a relationship between the deity, between God and the people. It's not like if you do these 3 things, everything is fine. So it's covenantal. There's a sense of a shared mutual responsibility, being on the journey together, trusting each other. And frankly, even if you breach that covenant, that somehow God will still welcome you back in. There's, again, these roads to healing even with God. So it's moving using corporate speak, it's in business speak. It's going, as you said, Aaron, from a transactional relationship where it's just a number instead of a person and a face and someone you know when they walk into your shop, to a relational relationship, transactional versus relational. And I think that's huge. And that can be done in big companies, and certainly small companies have a head start because they know their customers, they know their their family. So the point I want to then end on is combining this storytelling and some of these theses and ideas, and that's actually doing what you say you're going to do. And it's amazing what happens when you do that. And that's embedded in a few of our theses. So for instance, we just remodeled our whole condo. So we totally stripped it to the concrete walls and then began working. Our general contractor was very good. He was sort of a small business, but the biggest thing is he was honest. And frankly, he was kind of B+ at his job, but he was honest. And he made a very expensive mistake in the work. And he said, I will eat this, I will own this. And it was about $30,000. It was a major mistake because he knew he did it wrong the first time. And instead of hiding it and papering over the cracks and then us finding out later, which he could have done, he could have fooled us because I'm not knowledgeable in that space. He told us. And you know, when it came time to write the final check to settle the accounts with him, what do you think we wrote the check for? The full amount, not discounting what he like holding him accountable to the legalistic interpretation, the transactional interpretation. And I'm not trying to say my wife and I are anything special, but it evoked a human response from me, just as because he was honest. He told the truth. I will always do business with that guy now, even though he's kind of a B+ general contractor. I'll recommend him to everybody because he's honest. So I leave that mixture of story and combination of wisdom traditions there. And we see that story over and over and over in the various traditions.
Thank you, David. Soundari, what piece of advice would you like people to take?
I think we've heard a lot of great things. I think processing it all, I'm also making my notes and I'm looking forward to, refreshing some of this. I think, a lot of the times we talk about leaders to show up and talk about their personal stories as a way to connect. I think it's going beyond that, talking about people who work with us, talking about stories of their life and their work, which can inspire us and challenge us to be better. And I think that creates a better positive feedback loop for organizations if you can turn the spotlight on the people who are with you and take them on the journey with you. So I just, want people to really collect those examples and anecdotes from, people around you and keep your ear on the ground.
And probably the more junior they are, the better.
Well said. Well said. Aaron, what's our last piece of advice?
Brianna, you're a good moderator because you're helping us be more concise so that your members have a takeaway, right? Because we're all your members are going to have to explain something to either their employees or their managers or whoever. The advice that I would give, and something that I've learned here at PMI, but I think runs true for every good boss, good job, good mission I've been a part of, is if you are truly trying to build trust, build a space where people can come in and dialogue with you about it. That's not always easy. We live in a world that's polarized. There's so much noise and a lot of it is charged and some of it is full of hate and a lot of misinformation is out there. But I will tell you, my boss, who's truly just groundbreaking in her thinking, we were at an international conference where there was a lot of skepticism about, again, how can a company that was famous for making cigarettes transform into a company that's providing a smoke-free future. There's that 6-year-old I mentioned that you'd hear in the background. But but she challenged us to please make open in the space that where we were presenting to say, doubters welcome. And those two words, it wasn't saying that we wanted to have a drag out, debate with people. It was the tone and what was there. Doubters welcome. Come in and see the science. Come in and look at our evidence. Come in and talk to our employees. I think, Soundari, you mentioned that. Who are the people that make up part of our company? Who are the stakeholders that are there standing with us? So creating that space of doubters are welcome doesn't say, we'll take you on in the, we'll take you on in the arena and we're going to show you. It's about, let's actually come in and talk about it, and we'll put our evidence, third-party evidence, and our trajectory for you to see. So my advice to people would be to help create that sort of space. Maybe not always in an international meeting where you have a store, where you have a place in front where you can put doubters welcome, but how can that be part of your message? How can it be part of your offering? How can it be part of your engagement?
Very well said, Erin. Thank you. Well, with that, we'd love to open it up to some of the Q&A from our chat in Zoom, from our Facebook Live, and the Q&A box below. It's not too late to put questions in to anyone in the audience. I know you touched on one already, Erin, from Kareem, and he has a follow-up question for us that really is about, how do you engage with your employees? And I think that's a bigger question too. On messaging, on projects, how do you make sure your employees are engaged in your messaging, in your strategy from the beginning? And anyone feel free to jump
in. It's an old-fashioned concept, but you could just ask them. I mean, I don't mean to be silly, but to, obviously, I'm not sure the size of your organization. Is it 12 people, 1,200 people, 20,000 people? But there are ways to invite people to be part of the conversation. But I would say if you do that, particularly if it's an owner-founded company, but also if it's a publicly traded company, the people need to know that you do want to hear what they have to say, but you still may not accept what they say, or else they'll feel they've been sucker punched. They'll feel they've been fooled. But most people will feel a great sense of respect if they've been asked and heard, even if their motion, their idea, their input at the end of the day was not accepted.
Well said. Another question, let's see. Love the emphasis of trust and its impact on business and our corporate storytelling. What are some best practices to quantify trust to ensure that our storytelling is resonating? Is there a threshold for what distinguishes a trustworthy company or campaign from an untrustworthy one?
That's interesting. I guess for starters, is it being done just because, oh, this is a new technique, but I haven't really bought into it personally? I mean, are you genuinely on board with it, authentically on board? If you are, then it's a matter of experimenting with what's true to your style. Everyone has their own style of storytelling, their own pool of stories, the reservoir they draw on. One of the things I loved about what Soundari did is that not one story was she the actor or actress in the story. All the stories were about someone else. And when I've seen the great storytellers include themselves in the story, they're usually the goat in the story, to use the person who messed up. So they have a self-deprecating story as opposed to being the hero. It's like in the story I told about the general contractor, I should have pointed out that it was really my wife that wanted to pay the guy the full amount. She and the general contractor are the hero. It's not me. So, because storytelling can also go wrong, can't it, Soundari? If someone is just viewing it as a chance for self glamorizing and whatever.
Yeah, I think these are uncertain times in terms of brands really have to find a way to empathize with the audience. And I was just actually smiling thinking about, there was this YouTube video which was made about every COVID-19 commercial is exactly the same. And you can Google this and check it out. And it's like the same kind of messaging. It is so, the same kind of music, same kind of visual, same kind of thing. And you need to really create a more meaningful message where it comes across definitely as authentic. And I was thinking about Panera bread. I don't know whether it's, well, I know it wasn't definitely there in some parts of the US that I visited. I'm not sure if it's a national brand. And they did this thing about, helping people in supplying bread and food to people who needed it. And they created this thing called From One Neighbor to Another. And this was also where they really employed their delivery drivers. So it was not about the company shooting out a video and sending it. They got the delivery drivers to shoot short, authentic stories every day using their smartphones. So somebody is just driving into the neighborhood to do a delivery. They've got the smartphone there. They've got their Bluetooth on, they're driving carefully and they're just saying, oh, I'm just going to drop off this now. And this is what we're doing. And I'm here and really nice to do this. And it was very authentic, absolutely real, not salesy at all. And it was also a great way for brands and companies to diversify the storytelling. It's not just one person, one sitting in a central office necessarily just creating those. It's really having people engaging your employees and having people talking about it. And I think that clearly shows the difference.
And I think, one thing that we've heard about a lot is that there are these new storytelling mechanisms. Storytelling is ancient. It's just as ancient as some of the wisdom traditions that David talked about on faith traditions. But there's also something to be said for, with all the new technology and social media. It was a question from, I think, Yvonne on the chat. Social media makes it seem as if there's a lot of easy ways to do content capture and to share stories. And there are smartphones and sometimes employees and stakeholders are involved. But I think we should also remember that in authentic trust building and storytelling, it takes that exercise to boil down what you really want to be communicating. And that's hard work for any communicator, and there are communicators in all of the USHCC. That takes really sitting down and working on words, not because it's ad copy, but because it's trying to get to the nexus of what you're trying to say. I mean, the work that at PMI went into being able to state publicly as a company, if you don't smoke, don't start. What got the company to that piece of storytelling, frankly, because it opened up stories. If you smoke, quit. And if you don't quit, here's the conversation that opens up about better alternatives as they are substantiated by various bodies around the world. And this was a storytelling exercise in and of itself to come down to those words, those three phrases, because it was about, if you read UN statistics, more than 1 billion people potentially in the world. And so the storytelling is exponential, but it took a lot of work as communications people to get your leadership and your stakeholders to really quantify and make crisp what you're trying to do. And then the storytelling is easy. Then your example, Soundari, I think can happen. Then 1,000 flowers can bloom, but it does take a little bit of solid work and an investment of time of your people all across the company to get to that crisp sort of narrative.
Very well said, Erin. Well, this has been a very enlightening conversation. I wish we had another hour to spend with each of you. It's just led us to some great examples of things that we can all put into real-time tactical use. I know I'm taking lots of notes myself, but I'd love to just ask for any closing thoughts from each of you before we conclude today. David?
Well, first, let me thank you again as hosts and PMI. It's just been edifying and enjoyable for me. So thank you for that. If I were to, so my closing thought is to see the synergy, Soundari, between what you think a lot about and you're so good at, and the space that I think about. If you look at the three traditions we studied, most people, if you do a straw poll in a room, let's say you come out of the Jewish or Christian traditions, whether Catholic, Protestant, Orthodox, whatever, if you say, who here can name the 10 commandments? Most people can't, let alone if you say, could you name them in order? But if you say David and Goliath, oh, an image pops to mind. If you say, ye who without sin cast the first stone, a picture comes to mind. You can go through these various stories, parables, and some are meant with messages and some are meant just to turn the world upside down, but we remember the stories. Neurologically, we remember the stories. And that's what, again, something we learned from the wisdom, these great wisdom traditions. The the story, the power of the story. So I love how USHCC combined the two of us for this, because they're so related. And I see no reason why, just like with the 11 Theses towards the restoration of trust, that we can't find ways to use stories to bring new messages that are so important for restoring trust if you've lost it, or maintaining trust if you're so fortunate as to still have it. Thank you all.
Thank you. Aaron.
Time is so valuable these days for anyone, especially the members of the USHCC. So I guess the parting thought I would leave is that if a business, large or small, is going to have an impact for their stakeholders and society, are you going to spend time, your energy, talking about the trust deficit, or are you going to tell stories about the trust doing? And those ways to build the trust. And I have a feeling that your members could do a lot by spending energy being aware of the trust deficit, but really telling stories about the trust doing, because I know that's going on among your community. And I think that's tactical and exponential. That will help your reputation. It will build your business, and it will bring that sustainable prosperity that you talk about. So again, I think spend time being aware of the trust deficit, spend as much and more time telling the stories of the trust doing.
I love that example, Aaron. It reminds me of a phrase I heard recently. Do we say we're doing something, or do we do it? And that's just, it resonates very well with a lot of our small business owners, I'm sure. Soundari, final thoughts.
I think beautifully said. And I want to go back to saying that it takes time to build trust. A lot of the times we can say that we go on the assumption that the trust is already there. And in a way, this panel is sort of, for me, an example of that. We met digitally, we connected only digitally, and it's just broken the divide. I mean, there's no distance at all. And that's fantastic. So there is an inherent trust which is already there. And one of those things of believing it is, I trust you unless you do something for me to think otherwise. So going in, it may be faith. So it can be blind faith, if you want to call it that, but going in with that faith. And I think we need to share more of this. Somehow at work, we are of course sitting with communications people, but they are brilliant at storytelling. So, but at work, somehow we don't seem to share so many examples. We seem to get pretty data driven with all the digital transformation and technology and everything. There was this book, which name I'm forgetting, but the author was Scott Hartley, and he said, if machines are getting better, and they definitely will, we as humans can only become even better humans. That's the antidote to tech. So be a better human. And I'm sure this community is wonderful. The fact that all of you have been so easy to get along, and, without even having actually really meeting, it's possible. I feel, I can come into Washington, D.C. and say hello to Brianna and Monica and Ramiro and Aaron and David, wherever you are. And I think that's brilliant.
Very good conclusion to bring us all home. So we can't thank you enough to each of our panelists, and thank you, Monica, for moderating our chat on both Zoom and Facebook today. Thank you for your time. This concludes today's webinar. We will be following up with a copy of Dr. Miller's report for you to take home. You have a lot of great links in the chat to connect on LinkedIn and online with everyone today. And this is also being recorded, so you will get a copy of the recording as well. Please share it. And I hope you each have a great rest of your day.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Brianna. Thanks, Monica. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Aaron. Bye now.